Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the massive, enduring legend of a man whose name is literally synonymous with success, Napoleon Hill. Look, whether you realize it or not, if you've ever, set a 5-year goal, put together a vision board, or even just talked about manifesting your reality, you're swimming in his waters. He is absolutely the undisputed father of the modern self-help movement. And to give you a sense of just how deeply entrenched his mythology still is today, consider this quote. This is straight from a YouTube creator in the year 2026, enthusiastically telling their audience, Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying the most successful people who ever lived. He interviewed over 500 millionaires, business leaders, and thinkers, right? That is the mainstream myth. The accepted history that we've all been sold is that Hill cracked the ultimate code to success by studying the world's absolute most elite minds. But here's where we kind of have to pull the rug out. Almost none of it was true. Seriously. When you actually dig into the historical records, the legacy of this great success philosopher isn't built on millionaire masterminds or advising presidents. It's built on a chaotic, dizzying web of lies. Section 1. The Napoleon Myth. Let's dive right into this. So, Hill had this lifelong habit of fabricating these incredibly grandiose relationships with powerful politicians. I mean, he claimed he advised Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He even took credit for writing FDR speeches and literally coining the iconic phrase, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." But the reality? Hill was an arch-conservative anti-unionist. His political views were the exact polar opposite of the New Deal, and there is zero historical record that he ever even met FDR. And get this, he pulled the exact same trick with Woodrow Wilson, falsely claiming he sat on the White House negotiating the end of World War I. Just completely made up. Section 2. A History of Hustles. So, if he wasn't busy advising presidents, what was he actually doing? Well, long before he was selling success, Napoleon Hill was a serial con man. He was constantly reinventing himself just to stay one step ahead of the law. Let's just walk through this timeline for a second, because the sheer volume of his failed, fraudulent businesses is pretty staggering. Back in 1908, he ran the Acre Hill Lumber Company. His strategy? Buy lumber on credit, sell it for cash way below market value, and then flee Alabama before his creditors could catch him. Classic scam. By 1909, he's popped up in Washington, D.C. running an automobile college. Except it wasn't a college at all. It was a scheme to get free labor from these so-called students to build cars for a local manufacturer. Move on to 1915, he opens the George Washington Institute, totally unaccredited. And by 1918, he sets up the first National Trust Association. This was a completely fake entity he used to offer his own students loans at a 5% interest rate, essentially just pocketing the money himself. Throughout all of this, he repeatedly faced arrest for things like altering checks, mail fraud, and selling unlicensed stock. But honestly, perhaps his most brazen grift was his use of charity. Hill shamelessly weaponized the whole concept of the Golden Rule. In 1923, he toured Ohio churches, collecting these huge sums of money, over $1,000, which was an absolute fortune back then, for his intra-wall correspondence school. He promised the crowds that these funds would provide educational materials to help prison inmates rehabilitate. Sounds great, right? Well, the prison warden of the Ohio Penitentiary publicly confirmed that not a single cent was ever received. Hill just pocketed the money, and to top it off, he gave himself fake Golden Rule medals for the PR. You can't make this stuff up. Section 3. The Andrew Carnegie Fiction. Now this is the absolute cornerstone of Hill's entire brand. His famous origin story is that in 1908, the richest man in the world, industrialist Andrew Carnegie, invited him over for a weekend. According to Hill, Carnegie personally gave him a 20-year mission to unlock the 17 principles of achievement, and even introduced him to titans like Edison and Ford. The crucial point we need to look at here is the documented reality. Carnegie's biographer, David Nassau, went looking and found zero evidence they ever met. None. Hill actually only started making this claim in the 1920s, which is highly convenient since Andrew Carnegie had died in 1919 and couldn't refute it. Hill literally concocted entire books of fake conversations between himself and Carnegie out of whole cloth. Now you might be wondering, if he interviewed all these insanely famous men, where are his notes, right? Where are the photos? Well, Hill had an incredibly convenient excuse ready to go. According to his official biography, a massive fire in a Chicago storage building completely destroyed all of his evidence. Gone were the dozens of letters from Woodrow Wilson. Gone were the autographed pictures of Alexander Graham Bell. It's almost comical when you think about it. Every single shred of proof that he was best friends with history's greatest men just, poof, happened to go up in smoke. What are the odds? Section 4. Cults and Immortal Babies. Yes, you heard that right. Let's see how this builds into something truly bizarre.
By the late 1930s, Hill's philosophies weren't just inspiring everyday businessmen, they were inspiring literal cults. Enter the Master Metaphysicians. This was a New York New Thought cult led by a very charismatic guy named James B. Schaefer, and it boasted nearly 10,000 members. They operated out of this massive 110-room Long Island mansion they called Peacehaven, and this group took Hill's thoughts become things concept to the absolute extreme. They fully believed the human mind could literally alter the material world, and they practically used Hill's writings as their holy text.
And all of this culminated in a massive, bizarre national media stunt, the immortal baby experiment. Okay, so in 1939, the cult informally adopted a 5-month-old girl named Baby Jean. The master plan? Feed her a strict vegetarian diet, expose her exclusively to positive thoughts, and, by doing so, make her physically immortal. Cult leader Schaefer even demanded the New York World's Fair dig up the Westinghouse time capsule, which was intended to be opened in the year 6940, just to include Jean's footprints, since, she'd theoretically be the only one alive to actually open it. And here's the wildest part. Napoleon Hill himself was named the immortal baby's godfather. He even went down and visited the cult's estate for her first birthday. Just wild.
Section 5. Think and Grow Rich.
So while dodging creditors, Hill somehow published his masterpiece in 1937. And the supreme irony here is that he wrote this ultimate definitive guide to wealth while he was completely penniless. He was literally hiding out in his son's cramped apartment, relying heavily on his 29-year-old new wife, Rosalie. So let's break down what is actually inside this book. First, it popularized concepts like definiteness of purpose, basically choosing one single life direction and sticking to it. It also essentially repackaged earlier New Thought ideas into what we now casually call the law of attraction. Then there's the notoriously strange chapter called The Mystery of Sex Transmutation, where Hill actually argued that channeling physical sexual urges into business could elevate a man to genius status. Pretty out there. But honestly, perhaps the biggest secret of the book is that his wife, Rosalie Beelan, did the heavy lifting. She was the one who took his rambling thoughts and heavily edited them into the coherent, structured text that readers ended up devouring.
And devour it they absolutely did. Think and Grow Rich has reportedly sold over 15 million copies. To put that into perspective and ground us in the real-world impact of his work, remember, this book came out right during the Great Depression. It offered desperate Americans a real glimmer of hope. It basically told them that if they just visualized success and worked hard enough, there was a concrete way out of poverty.
Section 6. The Paradox of Legacy. To really understand his legacy, we have to look at the sheer scale of the shadow Napoleon Hill cast on modern capitalism. Despite a life largely defined by bankruptcies, multiple divorces, uncredited co-authors, and flat-out fraud, Hill's teachings birthed the modern prosperity gospel and the entire self-help industry. He literally paved the way for modern gurus like Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra. He heavily influenced Norman Vincent Peale, the guy who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. You can draw a direct, straight line from Hill to the mid-2000s phenomenon, The Secret. And, as we saw at the very beginning of this explainer, modern content creators in 2026 are still making videos preaching his 7 principles as absolute, unquestionable truth.
So we have to end this explainer by leaving you with this provocative thought. Napoleon Hill lied about his wealth, his connections, and his credentials. But his book gave millions of people the focus and the confidence they desperately needed to actually succeed in their own lives. So I have to ask you, can a proven fraud create a valid formula for success? Does the messenger's lifetime of lies invalidate a message that has genuinely inspired millions of people? It is a fascinating paradox for sure, and one I really hope you keep thinking about long after this explainer is over. Thanks for joining me.